the Stories from the Past historical fiction panel. My name is Carrie Schmidt, and if you don't know who I am the person behind readingismysuperpower.org. I'm also the co-founder of the Christian Fiction Readers Retreat and Just Read Publicity Tours, and I'm the co-author of Getting Past the Publishing Gatekeepers, which came out last year from Scrivenings Press. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read each author's bio, and after I finish with that author, I'm going to ask her to share a little bit about the book she's featuring tonight and the historical fiction novel that she'll be talking about. So let's start with Carlene. Carlene Havel has lived in several US states, Turkey, and the Philippines. In 2005, she became a believer in Jesus Christ as the savior of the world. Along with everything else that changed, she developed a passion for writing. The Havels make their home in Texas in the midst of their extended family. Carlene enjoys Bible study, sewing, knitting, crochet, and embroidery. You can connect with Carlene at her website, chavelbooks.com. Carlene, tell us a little bit about the book that you'll be answering questions about tonight.
Okay, this is Song of the Shepherd Woman, and it takes place in Bible times around the birth of Christ, and one of the main characters is a shepherd who heard the angels sing one night. The book is set a few years later, but everybody thinks he's kind of loony because everybody knows that couldn't possibly have happened. So he and his wife and their adopted child just have a lot of adventures while she grows up in that environment.
Interesting. That sounds so good. All right. And Lynn is not here, but when she comes, I'll come back to her. Sandra Merville Hart is an award-winning author of inspirational historical romance. She loves to discover little-known yet fascinating facts from American history to include in her stories. She is a blogger, speaker, teacher, and past executive director for devokids.com. She serves on the planning committee for something called the Faith and Fellowship Book Festival. Not sure if you've heard of it. And she has taught at writers' conferences, women's retreats, writers' groups, and she's spoken at book clubs. And you can connect with Sandra on her blog, sandramervillehart.wordpress.com. Sandra, welcome, and tell us a little bit about the book that you'll be featuring tonight.
Thanks, Carrie. My book is A Not So Persistent Suitor, which it's book 2 and my Second Chances series. You can read, each book is a standalone. It could stand alone, but I would recommend reading all of them because the characters they're intertwined and the story builds on each other that way, and I think you'll have a more satisfying experience. This book is set in Cincinnati in 1883 and 1884. So I live in the area, and so this story has been building in my heart for many years to actually write a book set in Cincinnati in this time period. Some significant events took place right at that time. And readers, I think, especially readers who know Cincinnati or who visited there, will love the historic locations that the book talks about. You know, the streets, walking the streets and seeing Fountain Square as it was in 1883. It doesn't look the same now. The high-rise buildings, they weren't there. It looked quite different. So it's really kind of neat. It was neat for me to write it.
Yeah. I always love discovering actual historical places, you know, in fiction and seeing them if I'm familiar with them in present day. Yeah, go ahead.
I like that too. It was fun to write. But Cora she dreams of becoming a kindergarten teacher. Kindergarten was in its infancy and in those days, and she's in love with Ben, who's a reporter. His dream is to become the best reporter in the city, and he is talented. but he makes a mistake early on that threatens that threatens their relationship, and then they have to start doing that building block again. And so he kind of backs off as the gentleman that he is, so that they can do that and build it in friendship. So he's fighting for his career. She's bent on achieving her own goals. Will their love survive a second chance at happily ever after? And if I could share one more thing,
Yeah.
my dedication for this book, I just was so happy to be able to do this. I dedicated this book to family and friends who call Cincinnati home or once did, and who love it as much as I do.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that.
Thank you.
Really special. So Sarah Hanks switched gears from children's ministry to full-time novelist with her book, Mercy Will Follow Me. She and her husband have 9 children of their own. Bless you, Sarah. A couple of whom seem to have inherited their mother's love for playing with words and crafting stories. Though Sarah dreams of a cabin by the beach, the family lives together in beautiful chaos in St. Charles, Missouri. She buys earplugs in bulk. Connect with Sarah at her website, sarah-hanks.com. Sarah, welcome, and share with us a little bit about the book that you'll be featuring tonight.
Okay, hi. My featured book, which I had to keep asking, which one is it again? About Fighting is the one, because the second one in the Sister in Arms collection came out last month. So Fall Back and Find Me came out last month, but A Battle We're Fighting is the one that is the featured one for this festival. It is the first one in my Sister in Arms collection. So this is actually split time. So this is the this is the historical panel. But this is a split time book. So we have a modern day storyline of Sahara and Jackson. Sahara's fighting for her marriage to Jackson. I won't go into the modern day storyline because this is a historical panel. But the historical storyline is about a female Civil War soldier who dressed up as a man to fight for her marriage and her husband. So both of the parallel storylines are women fighting for their marriage, fighting for their husbands. So she goes into battle in order to find her husband who's enlisted and bring him home, fight for her marriage. I know, Sandra, you wrote a book. I read yours about a female Civil War soldier too. Absolutely fascinating history, absolutely fascinating true history. Loved all of the research that went into what these women went through to dress up as men, and there are so many different reasons why they did so. There's different numbers about how many did, between 400 to 1,000. Sources differ, but we'll never really know, right? Because how many of them actually died in battle, and we won't know that that's what they were doing, and how many kept it a secret, we won't know. But there were a lot of women, I mean, relatively compared to how many fought, it wasn't a lot, but it was significant, who actually pulled this off. Even women who did so during pregnancy, gave birth in the ranks, and that's how they were found out. There were a lot of women who actually pulled off. So Bernie is one of mine that did. Bernice, known as Bernie in A Battle Worth Fighting. She is one of the ones that did, and her story of what she went through as a Civil War soldier to find her husband, and really kind of how she found herself and what she was made of and what she was truly fighting for, because she went in there thinking that she was brave and found out that her real motive was fear. She was going in there because of fear, and how she connected with the Lord throughout her battle. So that is this one, the whole collection. There's 2 right now. There will be 3 of the Sister in Arms collection. They all feature a female Civil War soldier. So that's what links them together, but they're standalones.
That is just fascinating history. Fascinating history. Susan Pope Sloan, 30 years after writing her first novel, never published, Susan retired from her technical writing job and delved into the world of historical fiction. The first 3 books in her Rescued Hearts of the Civil War series were published this year by Wild Heart Books, and books 4 and 5 are in progress to be released next year. She loves writing about real events, especially when they occurred near her home in Georgia. Connect with Susan on her website, susanpsloan.com. Welcome, Susan. Hello from another part of Georgia. We're the Georgia representatives tonight on the panel. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about the book that you're featuring tonight.
Okay. I forgot to bring one of my other copies. This is the copy that I use for my edits. It's Loving Lydia. And I guess we're all Civil War buffs tonight because it's in Civil War too also. It begins in Georgia with one of the mills. Some of you may have heard of the Roswell mills that Sherman had the women arrested and sent, but there was another mill also called the Sweetwater Mill, which was located in Campbell County, a county that no longer exists in Georgia. They divided it up. But this follows Lydia, who worked at that mill, and her stepdaughter. And her stepdaughter is actually featured in the following book, book number 3. But Lydia lost her husband at Chickamauga, which was about a year previous to this. This begins in 1864 when Sherman is coming through North Georgia and burning things down and arresting people. And he had all the women sent on wagons to Marietta because that's where the railroad came. And then from there, he sent them in companies over a few days, it seems, north to eventually Louisville, Kentucky, and Indiana. Because this was a true event, it was really exciting to research and to follow that line. It's, as some of you know, I think Sarah and I had a discussion many months ago about how long it took to travel from one place to another. And it's very exciting and a little daunting trying to figure out how they got there and how long it took. But these women ended up in Louisville, Kentucky at a refugee house there. But before they got there in Marietta, some of them stayed at the Georgia Military Institute, but then they ran out of room and some of them stayed in private homes. And the home that I have Lydia staying in actually belonged to a Confederate soldier who came back. And he was hiding in the cellar and they met him there. He was sick and the women cared for him, even though they were under Union soldier guard. It was kind of a dangerous thing for them to do. But then they wind up meeting later. The man, Seth, is he's on a quest for vengeance because he thinks he can find the person who killed his wife hiding in the Confederate Army. And so they end up helping each other as he searches for the person who killed his wife, and Lydia is searching for her nephew for other reasons that really come to bear in book number 3.
Oh, wow. That's a fascinating time period as well.
Yeah.
I was sharing with Susan earlier that I've only recently moved to Georgia, and so I enjoy historical fiction set in Georgia, kind of same kind of thing Sandra was talking about, loving, the research in Cincinnati. This helps me get to know the history of where I now live a little bit better. So, okay, I have some questions that I'm going to ask our authors, but at any time, if you have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat. And I've got it pulled up and I'll try to kind of keep an eye on it as well in between questions. So I'm going to start with Carlene again for this one, but then the other authors feel free to chime in. If you could live in the time period that you write about in your featured book, would you? Okay, that's part 1. Part 2, what would you love most about doing that? And what modern conveniences would you find it hardest to live without? Oh, Carlene, I think you're muted.
I was. The modern conveniences, I live in South Texas and we really love our air conditioning here. So that and zippers and Velcro, I think I'd really miss. But I would love to go into that time period. I mean, who wouldn't like to be a fly on the wall seeing the life of Jesus on earth? But I don't know that I'd want to stay because I'm afraid I might be in that crowd that was screaming, crucify him. So knowing me, going along with the crowd, that might not be so good, but it would be so intriguing. I don't think I could pass up the opportunity.
Yeah.
Just to imagine walking along the road and listening to him talk and seeing what the disciples really looked like and all those things who could resist?
Hearing his voice.
Yes.
What does Jesus sound like? What does Peter sound like? Yeah.
Yeah. Seeing the color of his eyes and all those little things that we don't really need to know, but wouldn't you love to?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. But yes, got to have that air conditioning.
Oh, well, like I say, it's finally gotten cool here the last few days, but
yeah.
we've had a really hot summer.
Yeah, I think I would like to go visit maybe in the cooler time of year in biblical times, if there is such a thing.
Is there a cooler time?
And then I want to come back before it gets hot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Sarah, what about you?
I would not want to be in the middle of the Civil War. I would have no desire to be a soldier, definitely. In the Civil War. And besides air conditioning, I would not want to give up real coffee.
none of that chicory business or whatever they had to use during the Civil War. Yeah, I hear that. Sandra, what about you?
Oh, yes. Are you kidding? Yes, I would definitely time travel back. And I would go to the Civil War because I'm so fascinated by that time period because I write in that time period. And I really feel like I did so much research on how the women would disguise themselves that by the time I was done with my research, I felt like I could do it myself. But in this series that's set in the 1870s and the 1880s, the Second Chances one, I would love to go back then too, to walk the streets of Cincinnati before, it was in those days when it was still big. It was huge then. It was a big city. For a while we were like number 3 in the States. So it was always a big city, but to see like the old library, there was a huge library there at the time that they have torn down, but to hear the descriptions of it, I spent a lot of time in there. And as far as the modern conveniences, well, I really like indoor plumbing. And while they did have it, some people had it at that time. I am certain that I would have been one of the poor and that would not have had that luxury.
Things we take for granted. I wasn't even thinking along those lines, but yes, absolutely. I need that too. My list is getting longer of things I don't want to live without. Susan, what about you?
Well, if I could go to Louisville where they weren't fighting, maybe.
The safe part of the Civil War.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get caught in those battles and in those places where they were burning everything down. Maybe I could go with Sandy and live with her in the 1870s.
There you go.
That might be a little bit better. I would enjoy the simple way of life, but what I jotted down that I would miss would be my washing machine, because I really don't like to wash things out by hand.
Oh, yeah. Something else I hadn't thought of that is now on my list as well. Yeah, absolutely. And I find it interesting that none of you said the internet or your phone or as a blogger, that's like one of the top ones on my list after air conditioning and the washing machine and indoor plumbing. I've got to have my phone, my Kindle, yeah. Good.
Kind of shocking to realize how spoiled we are, isn't it?
Oh, I know,
Start
right?
making that list.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And I'm sure it could keep going on longer if I asked every visitor here in the panel,
Absolutely.
what they would give up. We would just be here all day. So Michael has a question. What historical sources did you use to help craft, oops, I lost part of it, help craft your portrayal of the conflict, or the setting, time period, that you guys used? Maybe one or two of your favorite research sources. That was one of the other questions that I had too on my list. So we'll just go ahead and jump to that one. Sarah, let's start with you. Do you have some go-to research sources that you love to help get all the portrayal of everything historically accurate?
So many. I'm like looking over there at my shelf. And I'm trying to think specifically for A Battle Worth Fighting. I read a lot. I like to read the personal journals. So I read a mix between personal accounts and the personal journals, and then I have so many. Like They Fought Like Demons. That was a good one. There's a lot of different books that have like different accounts of the female Civil War soldiers. I read a lot of that. I read different specific about specific battles, and then the personal journals and accounts from the soldiers themselves, from different diaries and everything. I like to kind of do a mix of all of that.
Personal journals, I think, are so interesting because it's, this person really lived and breathed and walked through what you're writing. I think that's so fascinating to me as a reader too, not just well, I'm not an author of fiction, but a history geek and a reader. I love those personal journals to read. Sandra, what about you?
Well, I also go to personal accounts. I look at diaries and journals, and as many as I can lay my hands on to get the different viewpoints. I want to have a well-rounded idea of what happened, every viewpoint of it, anybody who's available. I just read until I really understand what they were thinking. And there's a wide variety, and they thought, they all thought they were right. Or they had strong convictions, and then that's good to understand. I like maps. Maps are like the unsung hero. They tell so much. I have a map on my wall that somebody, I'm writing a book on, that's set in Vicksburg, 3 books. Vicksburg, they went through so much there. But I have this huge map. I made a contact with our battlefield guide, and he has just been so helpful. He sent me an original map. I said, I can't find a map. He said, well, I've got one for you. And it's like, I don't know, 30 inches by 48 inches. It's amazing. It's hanging on my wall right now. I'm looking at it. It's amazing. So maps, I would say don't overlook those.
My husband would be totally geeking out right now. He loves maps. The older, the better.
Oh, me too.
Susan, what about you?
Yeah, I was thinking I found an interactive map, actually, because I wasn't sure where my first hero in my first book, what unit I would put him in, where would I find the battles and everything. And I found an interactive map of the 7th Pennsylvania Cavalry. And it was so fascinating because it had some of those personal excerpts from what people had seen, what they'd actually experienced. But I also found, besides a few diaries, a scholarly work that a lady did in the late 20th century about my stories that I wrote, actually, the true events. And she did such a good job. She was that was my primary resource for all my stories for that. There was also the Mary Gay House in Marietta. If you haven't been there, you might want to check that out. She wrote a book about her experiences called Life in Dixie during the war, I think. And it was really interesting. So those, you can't beat those personal diaries. Those are wonderful.
Sounds wonderful. Carlene, I don't think you probably had personal diaries, unfortunately, to work with for
Well,
other than the
you
Word
might
of
be
God.
surprised. The Bible
Oh, okay, all right.
is a pretty good reference.
Other than
Josephus,
the Bible, yes.
some of the ancient Romans kept a lot of records about a lot of things. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But actually, if you look at any of my historical books, you'll notice that I have a co-author, and that's the person who does the research, because I don't think I'm really that good at it. I can, start down a rabbit trail, and 5 days later, I'm still reading about something that by then has gotten to be unrelated. So my friend Sharon Fauché, a dear friend and colleague for many years at work, is co-author of Song of the Shepherd Woman, and she's the one who dug through and made footnotes and all these things that I'm pretty bad about doing. So we just work together to put that into the story so that it comes out hopefully as a seamless whole. And to me, that's the best of both worlds, because I just want to tell the story. I don't really care what they ate, to tell you the truth, but she wants to read about how the site was excavated and they found where the latrines were, and based on all the stuff that they analyzed there, here's what they ate. And I'm thinking, I really don't want to know how you found that information, but she's into that stuff. She talk about a history geek. She minored in history in school, and she just loves doing that. So we just work together.
Teamwork. It's awesome.
Teamwork,
And that's great to have someone who's willing to pay attention to all those details, let you just tell the story. That's great. Nancy had a question. How long did it take you to prepare for, I guess, research and everything, and then all the way to completion of your featured book before it? So from idea, preparation, finished product, how long did it take you? Susan, what about you?
30 years. That's why I was laughing. Actually, I first heard the story from a coworker who was a Civil War reenactor, and he told me this story about 30 years ago when I worked with him, and it just stayed with me. And so when I finally began my research, I found the book I told you about. So that cut my research down quite a bit. So probably a couple of years of active really getting into it.
Okay. Sandra, how long for you?
For this book, was under contract, so you tend to work faster. But I think I spent about 2.5 months on research, maybe as much as 3 months. Because I was going down a rabbit hole. I was thinking I was thinking she was going to go to another school, University of Cincinnati, which is where I went. I went there and I thought it would be so neat to write, but it didn't work out. So I spent a long time on that rabbit hole, but and then I guess about 3 months to write it. So maybe between 5 and 6.
Okay. And then the publication process.
Well, the publication, once that with this one was a pretty quick turnaround, because that was book 2 that followed the first book, and it came out 3 months after the first book did, and then the next one I think was 4 months later. So they've all been published since our last festival.
Oh wow. Okay. So pretty quick turnaround for you there.
Mhm.
Carlene, what about you?
I'm not sure exactly how long. For a while, the curiosity about what happened to those shepherds. I mean, they make an appearance and they go tell everybody what's going on, and then they just disappear from the Bible's narrative. And I kept thinking, I wonder what they did after that. Did they stick to their story? What happened? But the actual writing, I'd say, took me about a year. This was the first book that I self-published, and I was kind of discouraged, maybe thinking I won't write anymore when this one was going on. So it took a while, and I'd stop and start. So about a year, not counting Sharon's time, but to do the research.
Well, we're glad that you decided to press on and keep going.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sarah, how long for you?
I think from like initial brainstorming and everything, it was probably a year to when it came out. It came out in March.
Okay.
About 4 months of that is probably the actual writing.
Okay.
I was writing another book while I was researching, you know.
I'm
Not those.
amazed people that can keep up with things like that. I can't even read more than one book at one time. I can read it, finish it, move on, or I get confused. Let's see. Janice has a question. Have any of you done anything that your main character would have also had to do, like maybe dressing up in period costumes, or doing reenactments, or cooking, period era food, that kind of thing? Anyone had to do that? Susan, I see you nodding. What have you done?
It's similar. I'm part of a Christmas caroling group, and we dress in Victorian costume and sing all traditional songs. So
fun.
I'd love to go to a reenactment sometime. Haven't made it yet.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun. That's very Christmassy and lots of fun to.
And we try to use British accents. Go figure.
I love it. I love it. Let's see, Carlene, what about you?
Well, I've made a lot of period costumes for Christmas events at the church that involve what we think, but we not very accurate. We just we use things that we probably shouldn't have used. But I don't know. I think living in that part of the world in Turkey gave me a sense of some of it, because a lot out in the hinterlands in the time I was there, which was the 1960s, people still dressed the same way that they did in the Bible, and farmed much the same way, and the bakery would be a whole lot like that. So I got to go to some of those events, like a Turkish wedding and things like that gave me a sense of being there, even though it was centuries later.
Wow, that's really interesting. I bet that was a really unique learning experience.
Yes.
To be able to have. Yeah. Sandra?
Well, can I have two answers to that? One thing I do, I like to try to figure out how they made things cooking wise, baking. So, I mean, for a long time, I really wanted one of those potbelly stoves,
Yeah.
I wanted one of those old timey, or to learn how to cook on a campfire. I wanted that, but it just hasn't happened yet. But I do have a blog, Historical Nibbles, where I do old-fashioned recipes, like from 1877 or whatever. And they don't write out the recipes very good. You have to guess. So I have learned how to guess. I've learned a lot of trial and error on that through that. And my second one is, I always try to go to my to the location of my story. Go to the museums and walk the streets and meet the people, who are always amazing. And it really enriches the story.
Yeah, it's true. I know my grandmother, not quite the same era, but her recipes. She'd like some potatoes. And I'm like, well, I don't know how many some is. And she's like, well, until it looks right. I'm like, if I knew that, I wouldn't need the recipe.
I know my
can
grandma
see a
used to
little bit
say
your
she never
struggle.
used, my grandma never used a recipe. And so I'd say, well, teach me how to do it. Well, I don't know how to tell you. And so I put some salt. She said, you need some salt. How much? Well, put it in my hand.
Yeah.
And then I put it in her hand. That ain't enough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's how I learned.
Yeah, exactly. So that prepared you for having to try to figure out these recipes now. Sarah, what about you? Have you done anything like that?
Visiting the places, of course. I'm from St. Louis, and so I did go to visit Manassas and Bull Run and Balls Bluff and everything. Also, both Bernie and Sahara in the modern day story have a sheep farm, so I did get to go and get my hand on some sheep and feel all of their different wool. Shetland sheep are apparently very special, so I went to Shetland and got to see them weave that or spin the wool and everything. So I try to do as much of that with my stories, as much hands-on, stuff as I can get my hands on.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun. Okay. What is something that would surprise readers? This question may piggyback a little bit off of the answers we just gave, but what's something that would surprise readers about you or your writing process? Let's see, who wants to start? Sandra, let's start with you.
Okay. Well, true confession time, I guess. When I'm writing a book, my desk is a mess. And writing, it doesn't just stop at my desk. I have my research books handy. They won't stay on my desk because there's no room on my desk. They're on the floor, off to the side, often open to the page that, I know I'm going to need. So I'm a mess, guys.
I don't think you're alone in that. I have a feeling that I'm seeing lots of people nodding and shaking their heads. So yeah, you're among kindred spirits here, Sandra. Carlene, what about you?
Well, I always hesitate when people ask about my writing process because I really don't have one. I sort of just do what I feel like doing when I feel like doing it. But probably it would surprise some people to know where and when some of these passages were written. Some of them were written while I'm sitting in the lobby guarding the door while the kids are coming in and out, not letting any terrorists walk through. Some of them are written when I'm sitting with headphones on listening to music and my husband has football blaring on the TV. So it's quite out of keeping with what's actually going into the book.
Yeah, I bet that would be, you kind of have to zone in on what you're writing to not pay attention to all the other stuff. Sarah, what about you?
Well, one thing that surprises my children is the fact that I cannot spell. I am an absolute horrible speller. And they are like, how can you be a writer if you can't spell? And I'm like, I don't know. That's the red line.
That's what editors are for, right?
Everywhere. Yes, I need an editor desperately. I'm glad for good editors.
Susan, what about you?
I guess the thing is, I'm a morning person, but I don't write in the morning. I write in the evening, which it's kind of surprising to me. But the biggest thing is I need accountability. So I'm on the ACFW and the Loop, and I try to stay up with that, getting the critiques, and the Word Weavers locally getting the critiques there. So I need somebody to make sure that I'm towing the line.
Yeah, that community is such an important thing to have. Yeah. Michael says geniuses tend to have messy desks. So there you go.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, right. So it's encouraging. I'm loving your all's answers. This has been really interesting for me too as a reader. Speaking of readers, how can we as readers fellow authors, just people who are curious, pray for you with your writing or just with anything. Sarah, how about you?
Me personally, just I love prayer for my family on the home front because I am a mom with 8 out of 9 kids at home. So that is a battle every day, but there's always something going on. There's always something that something out there to derail me. So I really appreciate prayers for the most important ministry that I have, which is to my family.
I love that. Very important. Very important. Susan, what about you?
Right now for this cough, my husband and I both have been battling this for a few weeks, so it just keeps lingering and lingering.
Yeah.
But primarily, just for clarity and words from the Holy Spirit, because when he gives the words, that's when they really mean something.
Yeah, so true. Sandra?
I echo that, Susan. I pray for clarity of thought, energy, and a firm hold on God's hand as I wade through all this stuff I have to do.
Yeah. So important to keep our eyes on Jesus, our hand in his, and just keep pressing forward and asking for wisdom, like Susan said, for clarity, what's important, what's not, and keep me on the path that you have for me. Yeah. Carlene, what about you?
Just that my writing would honor God. When you dabble with Bible characters, it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
I just pray and would like for you to pray that I never portray people in a way that isn't pleasing to him.
Yeah, I love that. I've been given the 5-minute warning. So if there are any other questions that you all have for our authors, go ahead and type them in now. And while they're doing that, I'm going to ask, if I'm putting you all on the spot because I didn't prepare you for this one, but if there was another historical genre that you haven't tried writing in yet, but you would like to someday, what do you think that would be? Any of you can start, whoever has an answer.
Well, I'm totally undisciplined. I have written in several different eras, from American history, biblical history. So just if the idea comes to me, I'm going to tackle it. Probably foolishly. It's not courage. It's just foolhardiness.
It keeps you creative, though. Keeps you creative. Susan, what about you?
I'd like to do kind of Renaissance, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really intrigued by the people who gave us the Bible, beginning with Martin Luther and all those other people. They risked their lives so that we could have it.
Yeah, something else we take for granted. We're talking about modern conveniences. That's something that, we've never not had access to the Bible, and something for sure be fascinating. Sarah?
I don't know the answer to that question. I would write wherever a story would grab me. I don't necessarily, I've written, 1820s up to 1868, just because that's kind of where my characters went. And so, if a character, came and went somewhere else, I would follow. Yeah. So.
I love it. Love it. Sandra, what about you?
I would say maybe colonial or Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I answer Janice's question about Cincinnati?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Please do.
Janice, if you can see, this is not the music hall or anything. I didn't have that in there. But if you know Cincinnati, you might recognize the bridge that she's on is the Bench and Bridge. Did anybody catch that? And it was wooden at that time. It wasn't iron as it is now. And I have St. Peter in Chains. I have several things as they related to my story are in there, but not music hall. I'm not sure when music hall was built, but my characters weren't there. Wait a minute. There was a scene. Okay, there was a scene. It might have been music hall. I'm so sorry. It could have been music hall. There was a big meeting, and I can't remember the location of it. So
You're
it
just gonna
could be
have
there.
to buy it and find out. Just go buy it and read it and find out. So yeah, that's fun. Well, thank you all so very much for all of your great answers and insight. My TBR list has grown, and it was just such a pleasure to talk with you.